Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 44. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are discussing Chapter 7 of Prisoner of Azkaban, The Boggart in the Wardrobe.
Or, as we like to call it, feelings matter.
Lots of Snape content in this chapter.
And even I have to admit, even me, in this chapter, he is an absolute asshat. I mean, he's just such a dick. And to Neville, don't be a dick to Neville.
Yeah, forewarning, there's going to be a lot of Snape Sucks count points coming in this chapter alone. There hasn't been any so far in Prisoner of Azkaban. And I think there might be more in this chapter than there has been in the last two books.
It's not, I'm not going to defend him in this chapter.
Yeah, it was quite something in this chapter. But we start the chapter off with Malfoy coming into potions halfway through with his arm all bandaged, and he's really playing up that he's so injured, but obviously he's faking.
Absolutely.
And I remember them talking about in the first book that Madame Pomfrey can mend broken bones in a heartbeat, in a second, and it's super easy for her. So I'm thinking, if Malfoy has abrasions or whatever, certainly it'd be similar to that. Obviously he's fine, but he's just milking it.
She probably could have completely healed him in 45 minutes, but he definitely was like, no, bandage me up as a precaution. What if I re-injure it? And then he's acting like it's terrible when it's not. He's acting like I acted if anything happened to me before gym class when I was in high school. I was constantly seeking some excuse to not have to participate.
Same.
Especially if it was the beep test or something. And it's kind of like oh no, I've received a paper cut last week and I couldn't possibly participate. But he's doing that for everything. He just wants attention and sympathy, and
yeah,
clearly he's got political motivations in that he's trying to get Hagrid out of the way. But absolutely Madame Pomfrey could have fixed it in 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes,
So do we think that Draco was he obviously was fixed, but
he was fixed.
He's going around saying he's not fixed. He's fixed. I mean, a lot of things can be fixed with him, but obviously he's fine.
The end of the Malfoy line.
He's fine, medically speaking, and he's going around saying he's not fine. So wouldn't Madame Pomfrey be kind of offended, being well, I fixed you, so I don't know what's going on in your head?
I mean, she probably doesn't pay attention to the crap kids say. I feel like she has no energy for their gossip. So she's probably he came in sick, he left fine. I know he's fine.
Whatever.
Doesn't actually reflect on my job because no one, if Dumbledore interpreted it or something as oh, she's not doing her job because this kid is still hurt, it would be different. But Draco's being such a drama queen and it's so obviously an exaggeration that I think it's not actually, no one is looking at Draco and in any way interpreting it as a negative reflection on the ability of Madame Pomfrey to do her job.
I was gonna say the last thing she needs is students pretending they're unwell when she healed them.
She already has so many students who are actually unwell that
yeah,
she doesn't have time for this.
She has a hard job, so she doesn't need Draco making things up.
Yeah.
To make her job worse.
Now on the topic of Draco, he comes to class late being a drama queen, and Snape's just whatever, sit down. And everyone's that is not how he would act if it were anyone else. And I think Snape definitely shows a lot of tolerance of Draco and lets Draco get away with things that he does not let other people get away with. And I know to some extent that's Draco's father is a notable Death Eater with a lot of power, and treating Draco right reflects well on him as a Death Eater, two Death Eaters to Lucius. But I wonder if to some extent Snape sees bits of himself in Draco. They were very different people in school, clearly. Snape and Draco actually personality-wise don't have much in common. But because Draco is a Slytherin boy, because he probably sees the same pressures in Draco's life to turn to the dark side that he sort of faced in his own life, I wonder if he's overly sympathetic to those issues because he can kind of relate to them. So he kind of wants to make Draco's life easier than his was. And there's a million students he could have chosen that were actually decent people to sympathize with, but Draco was the only one he could sympathize with and get away with treating better while being a double agent.
I don't know if Snape actually cares that much. I definitely feel in the later books he maybe is trying to help Malfoy out, but he always has ulterior motives. So I just see it more as Draco obviously has ties to Lucius, who is still a Death Eater and Dumbledore knows that, Snape knows that, and being on Lucius's good side, it works out for both of them because they kind of have an idea of what's going on. And Draco's more likely to open up to Snape if he knows that, like, and Lucius will open up to Snape if he's more likely to know that Snape's still, like, a Slytherin, or how they view Slytherins at heart and all that.
I also wonder if Snape's just being more of a petty bitch in this book because Lupin's around, and so he's constantly reminded of his childhood trauma.
Yeah, I do feel like Snape really acts out in this chapter because Lupin's there, and it just makes him look like even more of a dick because he's not. I have a point about this later, but he's basically just targeting children to get his rage out about Lupin being around, and it's just like, those aren't the kids that bullied you, those are actual children.
Yeah, it's not his best. It's not a glowing representation of.
I mean, we do have an episode called Severus Snape Needs Therapy, and it's still true.
I mean, he hasn't had it yet, so it's still true. And even if he had had it, he would need more.
But we have the first Snape Sucks count for mistreating Harry and Ron, as Malfoy decides very specifically to sit with Harry and Ron just to bother them. But I do love how Ron, when Draco's like just going off on whatever Hagrid and all this other stuff, Ron's just like, keep talking, I'll give you a real injury. And I'm thinking about all the times Ron has punched or inflicted harm on Malfoy in this series. So Ron's not lying, he will.
He'll punch a bitch, yeah.
I think in the first book, he literally was got in a fist fight with Malfoy at the Quidditch game. I know in Deathly Hallows, he punches Malfoy while they're invisible or something.
I mean, I would too, to be fair. It's an opportunity you can't give up.
So, I mean, like, Ron, we already talked about how Ron's just really aggressive and just very much kind of laying down the law now that he's not taking any of Malfoy's shit this year. And this is just true. Like, I do not doubt that Ron would have punched Malfoy out if he had the chance in this chapter alone.
It would have been an interesting thing because Ron would get in trouble, but if Draco then sort of fought back in any way, we'd realize his arm wasn't injured.
Ooh, exposed.
Yeah. Like, I think I'm thinking too far ahead. I think I'm being a Slytherin again, and I'm like, how could I manipulate Draco into revealing that he's faking it? Because that seems like a valid option in my mind.
Yeah. But Ron's not thinking about that. He's just like, oh, this guy pisses me off so much, I'm just gonna punch him.
I mean, we've all wanted to punch someone a time or two.
Especially Malfoy. You have kind of this weird third point of view where, like, obviously most of the series is in third point of view, but Harry's perspective. But this is kind of like this way this chapter's set up with the potions class. It's like very general third person point of view where it goes like, this is what Harry and Ron are doing with Malfoy, but then it goes over to this is what Hermione and Neville are doing.
Yeah.
Which I get that it's kind of having to transition to like the whole Neville Snape setup for the later in the chapter, but it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Neville I just feel so bad for him because I think we've all had classes that we kind of dread because we don't like the teachers, or it's just like the teachers are not great. We don't like them. They're mean to us. They mistreat us. But Neville is legitimately like scared of his teacher, that he can't like adequately perform in class, and that's just like, this is like reasons why we talked about Snape not being a good teacher, is that like he can't really teach. He's obviously brilliant at potions, but he can't, like, not everyone learns the same way. And Neville is not someone that can really just read like ingredients and like instructions on a chalkboard and then do the thing. Like, he obviously needs something else.
He needs to do like a follow along. Like, he needs a teacher that does it like a cooking tutorial where you can pause and do the 2 cups of milk and then press play and then watch how long they preheat the oven for and then press pause.
Yeah, it's just not great.
And Snape doesn't want to demonstrate things because he doesn't want to be there.
Well, for him, it obviously makes sense to him because he's obviously, this is what he's brilliant at, and he's just like a really great potioneer, and so it makes sense to him. But like, I think a lot of teachers have that where like they learn one way, and so like, this is how it makes sense. Like, this is how everyone does it, but that's not
always how everyone does it.
That's not how people learn, and it's very rare when we see like Snape's teaching style compared to Lupin and how he kind of incorporates everyone into the lesson.
I always feel like potions to me is a lot like baking, in that like it's very specific. If you're off by a tiny bit of sugar, or if you leave it in for too long, it's completely destroyed. And like, if I have a recipe, I can follow a recipe. Like, I can read the instruction, do it. So I think I'd be all right at potions. But then I know people who I think are like to baking as Snape is to potions, where like they kind of can be like, actually, I think I find the sugar a little more granulated today, so I think we'd add a little bit more cream, and they just know that, and like they can just intuitively interpret things like, oh no, if you put too many chocolate chips in here it'll change the consistency and it won't hold together well, you can only put this much. And like, I wouldn't know that, but some people just have that, and I think Snape has that, you know. But I can also understand to some extent how, if potions is a lot like just baking, I can see how it would be annoying for a teacher who doesn't want to be a teacher to have to tell someone how to do something when it's written. Like if it says put 2 eggs in and someone puts 3 eggs in, like, and you know how to read, I can see how that could be really annoying.
Well, it's also the environment he displays. Like,
Yeah, it's a high stress environment. It's like being on a Gordon Ramsay cooking show version of baking.
yeah, like we do see, I think later on it during exams, like when they have their owls, I think Harry describes Neville seeming more relaxed during their potion final, even though he's terrible at potions. And I don't even think he gets a good grade, but just like,
Not being in Snape's classroom automatically changes the vibes.
yeah, not having Snape there just changes everything for him. And I think we can all relate to having a teacher that just like, it's like a dark omen, just ruined the whole class.
I've had hostile, borderline abusive teachers. I definitely know what it's like and how it feels. And like,
Yep, so have I.
and I've had classes with those teachers where I've done amazing and still been like, I might have gotten a 90, but this person is horrible and not a good teacher. They didn't get me the 90. I got me a 90.
Yeah, it's not great. So I definitely really sympathize with Neville and just like, especially because how young he is too.
And how sweet, and like he hasn't found his confidence yet. So like every little blow becomes internalized and becomes a part of who he is. He's like, "Oh, I'm bad at potions and Snape hates me," and not, "I'm, good in other areas," or like potions just isn't the thing for me. Like he internalizes it and then like makes it bigger in his mind. I'm not just bad at being a student in potions, I'm a bad student. I'm not just bad at making this potion, I'm bad at making things.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, we also know Neville's just not getting that. He's not just getting it from himself. He's like hearing what people say about him. He's known to not be the best at magic, and like all the teachers know this, and like his friends know this, and even like his gran just tells him everyone that like, oh, he's not as great as his father. And I feel like for the longest time it took Neville so long to come into his own because he lacked the confidence. If people had actually like, believed in him, I'm sure it would have been easier for him to like, give the confidence to perform well with magic. But
He gets no positive reinforcement, encouragement, or like compliments, and he always gets the criticism. He's always the butt of the joke. He's always the first person to be told they're doing it wrong.
yeah.
And that's hard. It's extra impressive to think how he turns out so brave and talented and like excels in the areas he excels to such an extent, because like he has to overcome so much without really having, like, he's not really someone's teacher's pet. Like maybe Miss Sprout really likes him because he's good at herbology, but we have no idea of him being like a teacher's favorite. Like Harry ends up being a lot of teachers' favorites. Hermione is obviously a lot of teachers' favorites. Hagrid loves those three better than everyone else. So like he has to overcome those things without being anyone's particular pet project or anyone focusing or prioritizing how he feels or like his journey of like discovering his self-worth. And like he does that on his own, and it's so impressive.
Neville is the best. I just think it's great having Neville here to kind of like, I think, kind of encapsulate what a lot of like, especially like young people feel about like not being great at anything or just like really struggling with stuff. And I feel like Neville's like,
Especially surrounded by spectacular people like Harry Potter, like Hermione Granger. It's so easy for him to be like, well, I'm just Neville.
well, Snape shows himself to be even more of a dick because obviously Neville messes up his potion, and Snape decides that he's gonna feed this potion to Neville's pet Trevor, his pet toad that he loves, that his like I think
Trevor.
his uncle gave to him or something. So obviously it's very special to him, and he's like, we're gonna feed this potion to him, and then if it works, he'll be fine. But if it doesn't work, he'll be poisoned and probably die.
Yeah, I like to think that like Snape couldn't actually just poison someone's pet. He'd get in trouble. Like he knows how to anecdote the common errors people probably make in that potion. But either way, it's a dick move. Like if someone made me do that with my dog, I think I would Avada Kedavra them. Like I'd be like, I'm sorry. I'm not fucking around with the health of my pet whom I love.
But I have two Snape Sucks points here. So I have 1 point for him just bullying Neville to tears, just telling him he's an idiot and all this terrible things you shouldn't be telling to child. And then from there one for, just not even just threatening to kill a pet, but also just announcing it in front of the class. Like he's making it a spectacle. And like and Neville's already like crying. Like it's just like just grounding him into the dirt even more.
I think Snape suffers from feelings of powerlessness because he's everyone's puppet. He's Voldemort's puppet. He's Dumbledore's puppet.
Yeah.
And I feel like he deals with it by like trying to feel like he has power in the few situations where he can, which unfortunately is when he's teaching the children, and it's a dick move, but like he's just trying to find some area of his life where he can feel like he has control and he has the power, and he grotesquely abuses it in that area.
Yeah, the authority. So we have like this kind of little side convo where we find out that Sirius Black has been sighted near Hogwarts, and Harry and Ron are talking to Seamus about it. And then Malfoy starts, kind of baiting Harry, being like, "Oh, if it was me, I would have gone after him already. I would have gotten revenge."
Which is hilarious because Draco is the biggest scaredy cat.
Yeah.
Like he's afraid of everything. He like cries and whines. I remember what he was like in the Forbidden Forest. I remember what he was like when he got gently scratched by Buckbeak. Like he is the biggest, most delicate. Like
Biggest baby.
yeah,
I just feel like he's just baiting Harry. Oh, we obviously don't know why, because of course, when Harry's like, "What are you talking about?" He's just like, "Oh, you don't know?" Because Malfoy loves having like information that Harry doesn't. But I just feel like that's what Malfoy does. He doesn't actually do anything crazy. He just kind of like figures out what people like their like insecurities and everything, and uses it against them.
yeah. He's a very classic bully in most cases. I find to some extent he's a caricature of a bully. Like I can't imagine someone 13 years old making fun of someone for having dead parents, for example. Like I don't know anyone who's not like very unstable and deranged would do that. Like even bullies kind of think they're the good guy.
I mean, bullying culture back in like the 80s, 90s had to be pretty, I think, pretty dark. I feel like we've progressed more in what you can and can't bully someone for.
Yeah, but I'm like I can't like in my mind Draco does things to look cooler than Harry Potter, but he doesn't intentionally like he like saying Harry's parents are dead doesn't make Draco look cooler than Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Like saying Harry Potter fainted because he saw a Dementor makes Draco look cooler because he didn't faint when he saw the Dementor or whatever. But like, haha, your parents are dead doesn't make Draco look cool. Like, so I'm rich now. Like, oh, your parents have money. I don't know. It's just dumb.
But I just wondering like what Malfoy's intentions are by telling like figuring out Harry doesn't know the history between his parents and Sirius Black, and it's like, is he trying to get Harry killed? He's like baiting him into looking for Black, but Harry was just confused.
I don't think he goes so far as wanting to get Harry killed. I think it's more like, A, look at this thing I know you don't know that pertains to you and has nothing to do with me. Now, Nana Boo Boo, I'm so smart. And then maybe also a little bit of like, he probably doesn't think Harry could get far enough to get killed, but he probably likes the idea of Harry looking like an idiot if he tried to do something about it, like getting caught trying to sneak off the school grounds or.
I mean, Harry's track record's pretty intense, so I wouldn't think it's out of the question that Harry would go look for him.
Yeah, that's fair. He's not known for his wise decision making and sensible
Yeah.
choices.
So I have one more. I think this is there might be another one after this, but another Snape Sucks point for Snape punishing Hermione for helping Neville, because I just feel like that was unnecessary. Like students helping students in classes, if it's not a test, I feel like that's not cheating or anything. I think it's encouraged because it's like peer building,
Yeah.
responsibility, and her teaching. It's just like helping people. Some people learn that way better.
Yeah.
And it's not a test, so I feel like it's not cheating. And he told her not to help her, but I'm like, that's because Snape just wanted to punish Neville for like no reason, just because he could.
It would be one thing to say, don't do it for him. But like she could help him and say, oh, Neville, here's a pro tip, cut your egg this way or whatever. And then Neville tries it that way and he's like, okay, thanks. That's helping. If she didn't do it for him, then I see absolutely no issue whatsoever.
Not an exam, not a test. It's not being, I mean, they're technically I'm maybe being graded on it, but like I just feel like it was just Snape being a dick for no reason. He just wanted to see Neville suffer, and Hermione prevented that, so he was mad. So obviously we find out that, Trevor was saved, he turned into a tadpole, everyone's happy, Snape was mad, so he punished Hermione and Neville for no reason. And then once they leave, Harry and Ron are very mad at, like, Snape, and they're storming up the stairs, and then Hermione was with them, and then they turn around and she's not with them, and she's at the bottom of the stairs.
And they're like, what?
And then they find out she has all her books with her because her bag falls apart. And they're like, why do you bring all your books? We only have these classes today. So it's kind of more hints about Hermione maybe keeping a secret, and she's not really great at blowing them off. She's just like, oh, I wonder what's for lunch today.
Ron and Harry are really struggling to find the brain time to figure out what's up with Hermione. Like they know there's something up, but they have so many other things taking up their like actual brain space. They're like, weird thing with Hermione, but Snape's a dick. Weird thing with Hermione, but Hagrid's in trouble. Like they just don't have enough room in their brain desks.
Yeah, I also feel like because it's Hermione, they're like, it can't be anything crazy because it's Hermione. Hermione doesn't do crazy, like, rule breaking things. So they're like, whatever Hermione's doing, it's obviously like,
It's not breaking a rule, so it's probably not anything that interests us.
yeah. So after lunch, they have their first Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson with Lupin. And this is their first practical lesson if you exclude Lockhart's Pixie.
Which we do, because that didn't teach anyone anything except that Lockhart was a dick.
But I just find it interesting that this is the very first practical lesson they've had, because I feel like Defense Against the Dark Arts should be a very practical, hands-on subject.
Yeah, you'd think something like has to happen to you for you to defend yourself. But I wonder if they just mean like in a more specific, like out of the classroom context practical. Because, like, to me, you read the chapter on whatever, this type of defensive spell, and then to me, you have to practice the wand movements in class, even if you're just waving the wand and not saying the spell, and even if then you're just practicing saying the spell without waving the wand, just to like know how to do it properly. And then doing it like the teacher throws a ball at you, and then you use the spell to deflect the ball rather than like a real valid attacker. Because, like, to me, you're not actually learning Defense Against the Dark Arts if there isn't at least a little bit of practicality. And, like, I understand maybe in year one if it's mostly reading and, like, proper wand care and don't poke each other's eyes out.
I feel like year one probably wasn't much besides like very basic spells, and maybe it was more controlled because, and it was also Quirrell teaching them, and then obviously they didn't learn anything last year with Lockhart.
Yeah. So maybe it's a little late for them to be starting to learn this, but they have.
Yeah, I feel like they're probably behind.
I will say, I think it's very fun that they leave the classroom. Like, they go on a little adventure to find the creature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved classes like that where we got to like leave the classroom.
Fun.
But on the way to the staff room where the Boggart is, Lupin and the students run into Peeves, and I find it very interesting how Peeves interacts with Lupin, because we see with like other professors and stuff, like he generally mostly respects them because they're teachers, and he obviously bullies the students, but he treats Lupin like a student, which is kind of like foreshadowing to the point that like maybe there's more to Lupin. Lupin's more connected to the story than we think of just being like a teacher.
I think Peeves sees Lupin as a peer in the same way Peeves sort of sees Fred and George differently than other students.
Well, I'm assuming that the Marauders back when they were at school had a lot to do with Peeves. So
got in their own trouble enough that Peeves like
yeah,
maybe doesn't like them specifically, but like respects what they're up to.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's kind of they have some kind of like there's something there that it's like, because I don't think, even if like I was trying to think of when Peeves like existed for the school, if he always existed, because obviously all the teachers would have gone to Hogwarts, but he doesn't act like that with like Minerva or anyone, and we've never seen him interact with Snape.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with being like mischievous. Like, he got up to no good when he was a student at Hogwarts, and Peeves like, I am also up to no good at Hogwarts, so
Yeah.
you're not the boss of me.
Because I don't think he would treat Snape like that.
No.
So I feel like it's definitely because of who Lupin is. So we just get like this little hint of like, this is more than a teacher. There's just like, there's some backstory coming here.
And then also a little bit that Lupin's just like the vibe of Lupin. Like, McGonagall's sort of very clean cut and like upright. And I feel like you treat her with more respect, not necessarily because you would respect her more than a Lupin, but because she carries herself in more of like a proper manner. And Lupin is sort of disheveled. Like, he's very laid back. He's very chill. He's like, come on, kids, we're going into this room. We're going to look in the closet. Like, so it's easier to be less like conduct yourself in a less official manner as someone like Peeves around him, because he's just like, this guy's got a hole in his shoe, you know?
The vibe I always get from Lupin is Robin Williams' character in Dead Poet Society.
Yes. Correct. That's spot on.
That's the kind of teacher I see him as. So when they go into the staff room, Snape, of course, is there, and as he's leaving, he insults Neville to Lupin, basically says he's an idiot and he'll be a danger to the class. In front of Neville, in front of Lupin, in front of the entire class, basically just, being rude and disrespectful for no reason, and Neville's obviously, like, heartbroken. So Snape sucks point for that. And I'm just wondering, I kind of talked about this before, but I feel like this is like misdirected anger. Like, obviously Snape's just really thrown off by Lupin being here and all the memories from the past he must bring up, and he can't obviously do anything to Lupin, insult Lupin, or get back at Lupin in any way, obviously, because he's a teacher and they're colleagues now, but he can insult the students. So this is what he's doing. He's just like, I can't get one up on Lupin in front of all these students now, but there's Neville.
I feel like he's projecting a little bit. Like, he probably, I don't think Lupin thinks about Snape as much as Snape would think about Lupin. And I think in Snape's mind, Lupin sees him as like a weak, unvaluable, like, victim who's shy and afraid. And so like he's sort of a hyper contextualizing and like trying to prove himself the opposite of that by like pushing others down to look like he's more of an authority figure, to look like he's more strong, to make it look like.
Yeah, definitely.
And so he's like, which is a dick move, but he's definitely like exaggerating those things because he's trying to like peacock, show off to Lupin. You think I'm that, but look what I am now. And Lupin's just like, yep, still a dick.
And it just backfires so bad because Lupin has just like the perfect responses. Like he doesn't go into Snape's baiting him. Snape's just being very like rude and unnecessarily mean and cruel to the student. And instead of like, telling him off in front of the students or like kind of like riling everyone up, he's just like, like that's disappointing. Like I was hoping Neville would help me with this lesson, and being just like really positive and just giving Snape nothing back, which is the way to kind of handle those kind of things.
He's basically taking away like Snape pulled Neville down and was like, he's not good. And Lupin was like, actually, I think he's good. You know what I mean? But without being direct and confrontational.
Yeah.
It also kind of feels like Snape and Lupin are playing ball with each other and Neville is the ball.
Well, I feel like Lupin has the last laugh, and he's such a troll because as we go into the lesson, Snape, as soon as he finds out what Neville's fear is, which is Professor Snape, he's like, I have the best idea.
Oh my god, Lupin is hype.
Such a troll. He's just like
And I like the like extra details. Like Neville's like, she wears a coat, she wears a hat, and Lupin's like, handbag? Oh, please tell me she has a handbag.
Yeah, I get the idea that like I think people always see Lupin as like a bystander for all the Snape stuff, but I feel like stuff like this shows that like he didn't like Snape either, and like this was the kind of stuff I think Lupin did, where like he was never like outwardly crazy or super like showy like James and serious, but he just had like those quiet like
Yeah, Lupin wasn't like, I don't think Lupin was like a trip you when you walked down the hallway kind of guy. I think he was more of like a quiet, petty guy.
yeah, and he's good at comebacks too. I feel like he was a quiet kid, but like with Sirius and James, I'm sure he kind of like he had his own way of thing.
Yeah.
I love this like petty like just kind of taking the opportunity as it comes, and he's just like egging Neville on, being like, "What color was the handbag? Don't forget the handbag."
Was she in high heels? Please tell me she was in high heels. He's enjoying
Yeah.
himself, which it's nice because I don't think the teachers often. I mean, like Trelawney loves herself; she always enjoys her classes, but like Lupin's having fun with this one, which is at Snape's expense. But given this chapter's context, Snape had it coming.
He kind of deserves it.
He looks good in that big bird hat. I'm not gonna lie, Alan Rickman looked pretty okay in the giant goofy bird hat.
Yeah, I'll recommend. So they have the class kind of think about when they introduce what a Boggart is, like what are you most scared of? And Harry kind of thinks about the things that he's scared of, which are obviously Voldemort, Sirius Black, two mass murderers that are after him. But he actually has like the mature thought to think like those things are scary and like fearful. But actually, I think I'm more afraid of this Dementor thing that just happened. And I feel like that's like I feel like most kids would be like if they see just something that is generally scary, like that's what I'm most afraid of. But Harry kind of really digs deep into himself and it's like these things are scary, but they don't really scare me as much as this thing at the moment.
The unique thing about the Dementor situation is like the times where he's come in contact with Voldemort at this point, he's sort of had time to emotionally build up. He's like, Voldemort's probably at the end of this magical adventure, past the chessboard and stuff. There's probably Voldemort there. So he has time to like think about it and build up emotion, but also like he has built up like ways to respond to Voldemort, things he can do to Voldemort. Like there's a bit of a plan. So like I find like it's easier to not be scared when there's other things going on in your brain. Like I have to follow the plan. Hermione said try this. But when it comes to the Dementor, it was unexpected. It was not in a context where he's expected to be in danger. So it's just the pure initial emotion with like no forethought. And it's like so sudden and it's a different, like he doesn't know if there's any physical threat or not. It's entirely like an emotional experience almost with a Dementor. And then also there's the recency bias, which is this happened like a few days ago and the other things happened like last year. That's so long when you're 13. Last year's ages ago.
So you wanted to talk a bit about all the different Boggarts that appear for the kids, besides Neville's, obviously.
Yeah. I think one of the first things that's interesting is that with the exception of Neville's, which is like an actual human being teacher who like basically abuses him, which is a very valid and probably one of the scariest options we actually hear about. The others are all just kind of like generic Halloween style spooks, like things you would find on the Halloween aisle at Walmart, or like most certainly find multiple options for in a Spirit Halloween. Like, I'm afraid of mummies, I'm afraid of spiders. Like, it's such generic, like surface level
Yeah.
things to be. I mean, I hate spiders, I hate them, but they're very like childish surface level fears compared to something like Neville's, which is like kind of a real threat.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows the trauma like Neville kind of has for like everyone has. I feel like as a kid, like your if you say what your biggest fear is, it's probably gonna be spiders or something. Definitely a thing, but very like, and it's just like a thing. Like I feel like all the people like they're saying what their thing is that they don't like, and it's all like
A dismembered hand, a zombie, a ghoul, like
stuff like that. But Neville, it's like trauma representing itself. Like
yeah.
I don't think Snape is really what he's afraid of. It's just like the feelings that Snape gives him.
Though, yeah, the way someone who's a figure of authority making you feel bad about yourself, along with the passivity of those around you letting them do that, is scary.
Which is very deep for a 13-year-old, but obviously to him it's Snape. But I think because they're so young, these are the things they're scared of. But I think when they're older, it obviously becomes more real. But I think Neville and Harry, like their fears are basically like a lot more deep than like everyone else's. Everyone else's are kind of like phobias or just things they find creepy or whatever. But like they haven't really dug into like their psyche and like what they're like why they're afraid of these things.
Yeah. And I also think Neville's biggest like enemy is sort of his own view of himself throughout the entire series. Like Harry has to fight Voldemort, but Neville has to fight how Neville sees himself, and like all the people that he fears and doesn't get along with are people who reinforce this negative view of himself. So like when he sees Severus Snape, what he's seeing is all the things Severus Snape says he is and that he himself, Neville, believes about himself at this point. But he's not actually afraid of Snape. Snape's just a dick. He's afraid of being incompetent and being not worth getting help. And
Yeah, what St. Press represents. Yeah.
it's awful, poor Neville. But I also wonder, like, were there any other like actually valid, like not to invalidate some of them, but were there any other like serious and potentially disturbing Boggarts that just weren't mentioned? Because you got to think some of the kids' fear is like disappointing their parents. Like that's a very valid, real fear.
I don't know if any of the kids would have been in that, like, been able to, like, comprehend that. Like, we know Neville and Harry have some deep trauma, and I just don't know if any other kids, like, would be able to comprehend that as a fear. I just think when you're that young, a fear is, like, a thing, and I just think they're thinking of things that they don't like, or a phobia, or
But I think like even at that age, disappointing people who like I honestly think if we'd seen Draco's, I think it would have been his father talking shit about him because Draco holds his father up to such high esteem.
Well, yeah, I definitely think it would have come out as something else. Like, I think Draco could have seen his father, but it's representing his fear
Yeah,
disappointment. Like
yeah.
we see Snape coming out for Neville. I don't think that they have like enough of their psyche like evaluated by themselves to like know that's what they're scared of. It has to be represented by something else.
Yeah, because the Boggart's reading their mind, so if they don't know they're scared of the thing, I suppose the Boggart can't see it either. But like, it could have been risky. I also wonder if they like pre-do like some sort of like mental health check on the kids before they put them in front of their biggest fears, because like that could be heckin' traumatizing. Like they don't, do they like we don't know if like one of the Patil twins almost had their brother eaten by a dragon when they're young and it's going to come out as a dragon and it's going to bring up all their repressed memories and they're going to be very unwell psychologically. Like I feel like it's a really cool thing and I'd want to do it and it's a great lesson, but I hope there was a little bit of forethought and like a slight bit of investigation and like
Yeah.
he knew Neville could beat that. Yeah, he jumped in for Harry. I hope he would have also jumped in and done the research to know who else to jump in for. Because it's not just about Harry Potter, despite what the title and Dumbledore say.
I think it's a great lesson, but it also could turn very dark, like what Lupin was saying, like, oh, if like what would happen if like I thought Lord Voldemort would come out and that just would traumatize the whole class. So like you hope there's some kind of safeguarding with like a thing like that. So speaking of Harry's and Boggart, Lupin actually doesn't let Harry fight the Boggart, and Harry before this was he didn't actually know how to make a Dementor funny, so he's kind of freaking out. But then Lupin stops it from going to him, and we see Lupin's Boggart, which is, as Lavender and Parvati think, is like an orb, and he's afraid of divination.
I mean, to be fair, maybe it's the Trelawney and him have a history we don't know about. Maybe he broke one of her good pink teacups once and she chucked a crystal ball at him. We don't know.
But so we had like this foreshadowing, and we obviously find out it's like the moon. So we're having like this already intense foreshadowing to Lupin and how big of a role he's going to play in this book.
We also don't get to see Hermione, which I think is interesting. We don't get to see what her Boggart is. And Ron jokes that it's like a 9 out of 10 on a test. What do you think Hermione's Boggart actually would be?
Yeah, because at the end of the book, she said it was McGonagall telling her she's going to fail everything. And I do think a sense of failure is what Hermione's might be her biggest fear of. I just don't know what it would come out of because I don't know. I feel like Hermione's a pretty mature character at this point compared to Harry and Ron, at least.
I think it would come out a little more in depth and
Like
just
ambiguous.
yeah.
Because I feel like most of the people, like we talked about, are they're seeing things, and I feel like Snape represents for Neville like a more deeper like fear. But I don't. I wonder what Hermione's would come out of if her fear of failure. I think is something that really sticks with her, or like her sense of belonging.
I think her sense of belonging is almost more than her sense of failure. Like I think everyone would think her biggest fear and her highest concern is like grades and doing well in school. But I think feeling like Harry and Ron don't need her or value her friendship is scarier to her. And I almost would say it's more likely that it's like a version of them being like, we don't want you to be our friend. What do you contribute? We don't need you, you know?
I think it's also just her existing in the wizarding world. Like we don't know her life pre Hogwarts, but based on how she struggled in like the first novel, like making friends and fitting in, I do think that like the idea of her like not being allowed to be in the wizarding world or being an outcast is something that weighs on her, which is probably why she tries so hard to be doing like everything to like the ninth degree.
Yeah, you've got to think a very valid common fear amongst Muggleborns is just being denied access to this world that they've now fallen so deeply in love and become so entrenched with. Like, you didn't know this thing is now a part of your life, and the fear that it could just all go away again is probably very valid and common.
I think that could happen. But I do think because I think Hermione's. I don't know how it would come out, but I definitely do think like not belonging or ideas of failure, not even just failure as like grades, but just failure as like a witch or like in life in general. I feel like she has really high standards for herself, and I feel like this is the book where she kind of sets herself up to fail because she's trying to do everything and you just can't. But yeah, I think hers would have been interesting to see. But I do like the idea that like Harry at the end, he's just having all these thoughts about like why did Lupin like not let him fight the Dementor? Did Lupin think he was weak? Did he think he's gonna pass out again? And I just feel like it's kind of obvious, and Lupin does tell Harry this later, that obviously he thought it was gonna be Voldemort, and obviously you can't have Voldemort just showing up in a classroom.
Yeah, they would end up in the Daily Prophet for sure. Voldemort seen in closet at Hogwarts? Question mark. Wearing a fluffy hat and a red handbag? Question mark.
Like, what if they had Voldemort come out wearing Neville's grand stuff?
Exactly. A nose, just Voldemort with a nose.
Ew, no.
Yes, Voldemort entirely made of noses.
Ew. I feel like what this insecurity Harry has about Lupin seeing him in like a very like vulnerable, weak moment, and he's just very much fixated on that. And we don't really like Harry's never really been super fixated on teacher before, but he's just like, oh, Lupin's seen me in like such like a terrible state, and he doesn't like think I'm strong or
I mean, part of it is like the sense of being on a stage that you have at that age where you think every embarrassing thing that happens to you, everyone notices, and every good thing you do, nobody notices. And like, I think to Harry, because he's a Gryffindor and he values bravery so much, he in his, and because he's a teenager who sees their worst things as being more memorable than their strengths, is going to think like, oh no, I fainted because I saw the Dementor, therefore no one will think I'm brave, and all my hard work beating Voldemort 2 years in a row isn't going to be valued anymore. Like, ugh, yeah, but he fainted when he saw the Dementor, so it totally doesn't matter that he risked his life 2 years in a row. Because being brave is so important to him, and like specifically that event would be seen as unbrave.
yeah, I don't think Harry doesn't really like being seen vulnerable either. And I just think Ron and Hermione's one thing because they're basically like family now at this point, but anyone else like seeing him in a vulnerable state kind of like unnerves him.
Yeah. How dangerous do you think the Boggart actually is? Like, we know it's emotionally, obviously, and psychologically scary because you're frightened, but like, does it have an attack?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it maybe just like drives you crazy. I think it's more like a psychological torture. Like I don't think.
So if you don't know ridiculous, it just like scares you until you fall apart emotionally and
Yeah, because we see like in book 5, like Mrs. Weasley's trying to kill the Boggart, and it sends her into like almost like a breakdown
yeah.
because she couldn't get the strength to like go, and it didn't do anything to her. And we don't know how long she's up there, but like
Yeah, but it flashed between all the kids, so we know it was a while.
yeah. Yeah, so like obviously she's up there for a while, and it was like I didn't do anything to her, but
That's interesting. It's interesting to think that there's like a creature or monster in the wizarding world that's only attack is emotional, because the emotional state of characters is so undervalued sort of throughout the series, like specifically with Harry, and like psychological abuse is fine, and like people can tell you you're the worst and we'll just let them tell you that because that won't impact anything, is interesting to finally meet the first creature sort of that's like, no, this only hurts you in that way, which kind of like validates feelings as being valuable. Like it can only hurt you by making you feel bad, and that in itself is an attack that is seen as dangerous. Like, wow, feelings are finally validated.
Yeah, but do you have any closing remarks for this chapter?
My first closing remark, yeah, is that Lupin seems like a wonderful teacher, and I would love to attend his class. He seems great, and the homework was not hard. It's literally read the chapter and summarize it. That's great. That's decent homework, and it makes sense. I think I would rather have done the theory and then the practical, just to like have a bit of an understanding of what a Boggart is before I fight it. But also, I understand wanting your first class to make an impression and be active and exciting and fun. And they're 13, they know how to read a book, they can do that at home. So, like, overall, good teacher, solid
I think
method.
it's nice because it's the first class, so, easing them into it is like a nice way to go. Especially because he's a new teacher too, so he's like,
Making a reputation for himself as having fun classes. And also, I feel like you can't leave the Boggart in the wardrobe for too long. Someone will end up cleaning it up if you take too long to get your students in there.
well, he told Dumbledore, do not get rid of that. I want my students to get rid of it.
Yeah, but Dumbledore doesn't listen, so we're lucky that
He's told Dumbledore, but
he must have worded it like, I think Harry Potter would really benefit from watching his friends fight their biggest fears, so do please leave that Boggart.
and Dumbledore's like, yes.
It's all about manipulating Dumbledore. That's the trick.
Manipulate him back. He deserves it. Yeah, I just definitely think Neville deserves the best, and Snape sucks. Those are my closing remarks. And if you have any thoughts on today's episode or previous episodes, you can email us at potterrevisited@gmail.com or reach us on social media at potterrevisited. And next time we'll be back with chapter 8, which is The Flight of the Fat Lady. Then we'll see you next time. Bye.